There are specific ways in which platforms and the way we think about platforms is fundamentally different from the way we think about pipe business models. The first is that in a pipe business model, our focus was always on the consumer. We were always trying to sell something to somebody. In a platform business model, it's much more complex because you very often, you do not know who's paying you. There are some people who you are serving for free, some people who you are actually incentivizing to come on board. You're actually paying them to get on board. And there are some others who pay you in varying different amounts. So what's really important in a platform model is to ensure that your pricing and your incentives are structured in a way that all participants are always encouraged to come back onto the system. So the metrics that we measure, instead of just looking at sales, instead of looking at consumption metrics, we increasingly start looking at participation metrics and whether the ecosystem is participating on a regular basis. The second thing that's really important when we think about platforms is that the source of competitive advantage completely changes. In a world of pipes, where you talked about pipe business models, the source of competitive advantage was the resources that you had access to, which is why today Saudi Aramco is the world's biggest company because it has access to the largest oil fields in the world. So you competed on the basis of resources that you had access to. Platforms compete not on the basis of resources they have access to, but on the basis of ecosystems. If another company starts getting the same ecosystem, the platform finds competition from there. And that is why you look at Facebook, you look at Instagram, you look at WhatsApp, and you think that there are three different businesses. But they're all of them going after the same ecosystem. People who want to connect with their friends and want to have a good conversation with those friends in different ways. And so increasingly, the competition moves away from a competition for resources to a competition for ecosystems. We're seeing something very similar happening in the healthcare industry today, where traditionally it's been the hospitals who have always had access to patients. But today, pharmacies are using data about patients and competing with hospitals by launching different kinds of healthcare, telehealth services. Today, we have companies like Apple and Google and consumer health companies like Philips coming in, using the Internet of Things to start competing with hospitals. And all of this is happening because the competition is not based on resources. It's not based on the kind of hospital facilities you have, but it's based on the ecosystem that you can build around yourself. That's where the competition is shifting when we move from pipes to platforms. A third thing that happens when you move from pipes to platforms is that the source of value creation shifts from an internal process to an external interaction in the ecosystem. And this is something that we see repeatedly. If you were to run a pipe business, if you were to run a traditional business, you would look at the process of value creation and scale it over time. Whereas in a platform, what you look at is what is the interaction between two parties, what is driving that interaction, and how can I scale that interaction over time. If I were to take a very simple example, if I open my app and if I open my phone and start the Uber app and it shows no taxi available, that's an example of an interaction that's failing. I had an intention to participate in an interaction and that interaction failed. And this is the fundamental difference between a pipe business and a platform business. A pipe business fails when an internal process fails. A platform business fails when a usage in the ecosystem fails, the interaction itself fails. And so if you look at all of this, we're moving from a world that has been process first, that has been focused on process efficiency, to a world that needs interaction efficiency. And that is why the role of data becomes really important, because in a world of processes, the role of data has always been to enable business decision making. In a world of interactions, data is not merely a mechanism to make business decisions. Data is what drives the business in itself. And when we talk about data for life, this is what comes to mind, that data in a world of platforms is no longer going to be about helping big company make better decisions. It's going to be about helping vast ecosystems perform much better, because centrally, the ability to match these ecosystems together is improving because of the data that we have about them. And so if I were to summarize this whole idea of the platform, fundamentally a platform business model is about an infrastructure that enables interactions. Interactions are at the heart of the platform business model. You have a producer and a consumer, you enable them to interact, that interaction scales repeatedly, and that's how a platform business model scales.